Welcome to your personalized deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking you through the world of Stoicism, guided by excerpts from the Daily Stoic. This book seems right up your alley, especially given your interest in practical philosophy. And you know how it can be used to handle everyday challenges.
You come to the right place for that. What's so captivating about the Daily Stoic is how it takes this ancient philosophy and makes it relevant to our modern lives.
It's almost as if the Stoics knew we'd be dealing with similar issues centuries later. We're going to explore the core principles of Stoicism and how you can actually use them. And of course, we'll sprinkle in some fascinating stories about the historical figures who embrace this philosophy.
It's going to be a fascinating journey. Ready to dive in?
Absolutely. The Daily Stoic kicks off with what it calls the big three: perception, action, and will. These sound like the foundational pillars of Stoicism, right?
Exactly. The book dives right into these three disciplines on January 4th. It emphasizes that these aren't just abstract concepts. They're practical tools for living a better life.
And that practicality is what drew me to Stoicism in the first place. One quote from the book really struck me. All you need are these: certainty of judgment in the present moment, action for the common good in the present moment, and an attitude of gratitude in the present moment for anything that comes your way. It's like a roadmap for Stoic living.
What's so powerful about that quote is its emphasis on the present moment. Instead of dwelling on the past or worrying about the future, Stoicism encourages us to be fully present in the now, and each of the big three helps us achieve that presence.
Okay. Let's break down each of those disciplines. What's the Stoic take on perception?
Well, Stoics believe we should focus on controlling our reactions to events, not the events themselves. For example, imagine your flight gets delayed. It's easy to get frustrated, but the delay is ultimately outside your control.
That's happened to me more times than I can count.
A Stoic wouldn't waste energy getting upset about the delay. Instead, they would focus on what they can control their reaction. Maybe they'd use the extra time to catch up on a book, meditate, or plan their next move. It's about finding opportunity within the unexpected.
It's about shifting your perspective from what you can't control to what you can. That makes a lot of sense. And what about action? How does that fit into the Stoic framework?
In Stoicism, action is about taking responsibility and doing the right thing, even when it's difficult. The Daily Stoic highlights this principle with the story of Cato the Younger, a Roman Stoic who chose to walk to his destinations even in bad weather as a way to build resilience and self-discipline.
I love that story. It's a great example of how we can choose to embrace challenges instead of letting them control us.
Right.
So we've got perception and action covered. Now let's talk about will. What's the Stoic perspective on that?
Will, in the Stoic sense, is about accepting what we cannot change. This can be a tough one, but it's essential for finding inner peace. The Daily Stoic brings up a powerful example: General Dwight D. Eisenhower's letter to his wife before the Normandy invasion. He had done everything in his power to prepare for the operation, but he also accepted that the ultimate outcome was beyond his control.
Wow. That's a pretty heavy example. It really puts things into perspective. It seems like Stoicism can be a source of strength in incredibly difficult times, but let's face it, even in less dramatic situations, our modern world throws a lot of distractions our way.
You're absolutely right, and the Daily Stoic doesn't shy away from that. It's fascinating how the Stoics, writing centuries ago, seem to recognize challenges similar to what we face today.
The entry from January 12th really stood out to me. It's like they knew you'd be dealing with constant notifications and information overload. How did they view those kinds of distractions?
They were wary of both internal and external distractions, seeing them as threats to our freedom and clarity. Stoics believe that if we're constantly reacting to external stimuli, we lose control over our own minds. They even saw addiction, and not just to substances, but to things like gossip and the internet, as a form of losing that control.
That's such an interesting way to think about it. Have you ever found yourself getting sucked into those kinds of distractions? I know I have.
Absolutely. It's so easy to get pulled in by the constant stream of information and the desire to stay connected. But the Stoics remind us to be mindful of those distractions and to cultivate the discipline to resist them.
And what about the distractions that come from within, like comparing ourselves to others or seeking validation? Those can be just as insidious.
You've hit on another key point. The Daily Stoic emphasizes the importance of not comparing ourselves to others, especially when it comes to wealth or status. The book uses the example of F. Scott Fitzgerald, who was captivated by the ultra-rich.
Fitzgerald seemed to believe that wealth made people fundamentally different, which, as his friend Ernest Hemingway pointed out, caused him a great deal of pain. Hemingway's response was classic. Yes, they have more money.
It's such a simple yet profound observation. Material possessions don't guarantee happiness, and the Daily Stoic reminds us that seeking validation from others, especially those we perceive as being more successful, can actually be a recipe for unhappiness.
The book even quotes Marcus Aurelius on this topic.
Yes, and it's a striking reminder that even an emperor, someone at the pinnacle of worldly success, saw the flaws in those whom others try so hard to impress.
It's easy to get caught up in chasing external markers of success, but the Stoics remind us that true wealth and freedom are found within. It's about mastering our own minds and finding contentment in what we already have.
Exactly. It's not about getting everything you want, but wanting everything you have. That's a key principle of Stoicism.
So, how do we actually cultivate that inner wealth and freedom? What practical advice does the Daily Stoic offer?
The book is filled with practical wisdom. One of the most important pieces of advice is to avoid unnecessary conflict. The February 6th entry really digs into this idea. It cautions us against getting pulled into pointless arguments, especially those that flare up online or in public spaces. It's like a Stoic version of don't feed the trolls, recognizing that some people are just looking for a fight, and there's no benefit in engaging with them.
Oh, I can definitely relate to that. Sometimes it's best to just walk away from those online battles. It's like they drain your energy for no good reason. What other practical tips does the book offer?
Another key piece of advice is to focus on what you can control. The Daily Stoic highlights this on February 8th. Using the example of doing your job well and not getting bogged down in things outside your sphere of influence.
It's easy to get caught up in office drama or worry about things we can't change, but the Stoics remind us to direct our energy where it matters most. That reminds me of a friend who was getting incredibly stressed about a work project. It was a huge team effort, and she felt responsible for every single detail, even the parts she had no control over.
It sounds like she was taking on more than she could handle.
Exactly, and the more stressed she got, the less effective she became. Eventually, she had to step back and remind herself to focus only on what she could personally influence. It was a tough lesson. But she learned to let go of the things she couldn't control and focus on doing her best within her own area of responsibility.
It's a classic example of how Stoic principles can be applied in everyday situations. And it brings to mind a story from the Daily Stoic about Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor. Despite holding immense power, he focused on fulfilling his duties rather than getting distracted by things he couldn't change, like palace intrigue or the opinions of his critics.
It's inspiring to think that even someone in his position found value in focusing on what he could control. It's like a reminder that no matter who we are or what challenges we face, we always have a choice in how we respond. And speaking of challenges, the Daily Stoic also emphasizes the importance of embracing them.
Absolutely. The September 22nd entry uses a brilliant analogy to illustrate this point. It compares facing challenges to an athlete training for the Olympics. Obstacles aren't seen as setbacks, but as opportunities for growth and development.
It's like adopting that no pain, no gain mentality, but applying it to all areas of life.
Exactly. And the book goes beyond the analogy to provide a real-life example. Muggsy Bogues, the shortest player in NBA history.
That story's so inspiring. Despite facing doubts and discouragement, Bogues never let his height define him.
He transformed what many saw as a weakness into his greatest strength. He didn't just overcome his perceived disadvantage, he used his speed and agility to outmaneuver larger opponents, turning it into a unique advantage.
It's a powerful example of how we can reframe challenges and find opportunities within them, just like Bogues did. So, we've talked about avoiding unnecessary conflict, focusing on what we can't control, and embracing challenges. What other insights does the Daily Stoic offer for putting Stoicism into practice?
Another crucial step is choosing our mentors wisely. As emphasized in the March 9th entry, the book highlights the importance of surrounding ourselves with positive influences and being mindful of the company we keep.
I've always loved that quote from Goethe. Tell me with whom you consort, and I will tell you who you are.
It speaks volumes about the impact our social circles have on us. The people we spend time with shape our thoughts, beliefs, and actions, whether we realize it or not. The Daily Stoic urges us to be intentional about the relationships we cultivate.
It's like that saying often attributed to Jim Rohn. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If we want to live virtuous and fulfilling lives, we need to surround ourselves with people who support us in that journey.
You're absolutely right. But even when we surround ourselves with positive influences, we'll inevitably encounter difficult people. The Daily Stoic offers guidance on how to navigate those interactions with grace and wisdom. The October 15th entry encourages us to give people the benefit of the doubt even when their actions seem hurtful or malicious.
It's easy to fall into the trap of negativity, especially when we feel wronged or hurt. We might jump to conclusions or assume the worst about someone's intentions.
Yes, but as the Daily Stoic reminds us, that approach often leads to unnecessary conflict and suffering. It even quotes a Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, who said, "Even a dog distinguishes between being stumbled over and being kicked."
It's a humorous but insightful analogy. Just like a dog might initially react with a snap or a bark if someone accidentally steps on it. We too might react defensively when we feel slighted. But when we realize the offense was unintentional, our reaction usually softens.
Exactly. And a key characteristic of a virtuous person, according to the Daily Stoic, is the ability to extend that same understanding and generosity to others, even when we feel offended. This approach can make life more bearable and fosters tolerance and understanding.
It's about choosing compassion over suspicion, even when it's difficult. That reminds me of another important point the book makes. Our judgments and assumptions often stem from our own internal state, not necessarily the situation itself.
You're right. The book emphasizes that everything turns on your assumptions about it, and that's on you. It suggests that we have the power to choose how we interpret events and reframe our perspectives, regardless of the situation.
It's about recognizing that our internal dialogue shapes our external experiences. If we choose to focus on the negative, we're more likely to perceive the world through a negative lens. But if we choose to look for the positive, even in challenging situations, we can shift our entire experience.
That ability to reframe our perspectives is essential to Stoic practice, and it's closely tied to the idea of turning things inside out. This practice, which the book discusses on April 27th, encourages us to view situations from multiple angles.
It's about challenging our initial reactions and seeking a more balanced perspective. I imagine this can be especially helpful when dealing with adversity or setbacks. Have you ever found this technique useful in your own life?
Absolutely. I've found that taking a step back and viewing a situation as an outsider might reveal aspects I hadn't considered before. It helps me detach from my initial emotional response and see things more objectively. The Daily Stoic even suggests applying this technique to our own mortality, encouraging us to contemplate death as a way to gain a fresh perspective on life.
That's a powerful concept. It reminds me of the Stoic practice of memento mori, the meditation on death.
Yes. And the Daily Stoic highlights how this practice can help us appreciate the present moment and make the most of the time we have. It's a reminder that life is finite and precious.
But it's not all about contemplating our own mortality. The Daily Stoic also encourages us to be kind and forgiving towards others, recognizing that we all make mistakes.
The October 18th entry comes to mind. While it cautions against false friendships and the dangers of associating with people who don't share our values, it also encourages us to look inward and reflect on times we haven't been true friends to others. It's a call to hold ourselves to the same standards of virtue and integrity that we expect from others.
It's a reminder that we're all works in progress, and that extending grace and understanding to others, as well as ourselves, is essential for growth and connection. What other insights does the Daily Stoic offer for cultivating strong relationships?
The book emphasizes that we're all interconnected and part of a larger whole. The October 3rd entry beautifully describes this with the mantra of mutual interdependence, highlighting how all things are mutually woven together and therefore have an affinity for each other.
It's a poetic way of expressing the idea that our actions have ripple effects, and that treating others with kindness and respect ultimately benefits us all. But even when we strive for kindness, we'll inevitably encounter individuals who behave poorly or try to harm us. It's a reality of the human experience.
That's true, and the Daily Stoic doesn't shy away from that reality. It offers several strategies for dealing with these difficult people, including avoiding unnecessary conflict, focusing on our own virtue, and recognizing that the best revenge is to not be like those who have wronged us.
That's such a powerful idea, rising above the fray and choosing to respond with integrity, even in the face of negativity.
Exactly. The book even quotes Marcus Aurelius, who advised, "The best way to avenge yourself is to not be like that."
It's about recognizing that stooping to the level of those who have hurt us only diminishes our own character. There's a certain strength and dignity in choosing the higher path.
And the Daily Stoic also draws wisdom from Seneca, who offers a similar perspective. How much better to heal than to seek revenge from injury? Vengeance wastes a lot of time and exposes you to many more injuries than the first that sparked it. Anger always outlasts hurt. Best to take the opposite course. Would anyone think it normal to return a kick to a mule or a bite to a dog?
It's a brilliant reminder that retaliation often creates a vicious cycle of negativity. Choosing kindness and understanding, even when it's difficult, can be a far more powerful and liberating approach.
Absolutely. And the book highlights a classic example of choosing the higher path, Cato, who
Yeah.
chose to walk to his destinations, even in bad weather, to build resilience.
It's such a simple yet profound example of how we can embrace challenges instead of letting them control us.
And the Daily Stoic connects this practice to the broader Stoic principle of training our minds and bodies to endure hardship. It's about cultivating that I can handle anything attitude, which prepares us to face life's inevitable challenges with courage and composure.
It's recognizing that adversity, when approached with the right mindset, can actually make us stronger. What other insights does the book offer for cultivating that resilience?
The February 23rd entry reminds us that getting worked up over events outside our control is ultimately futile. Circumstances have no care for our feelings.
So, it's about accepting that we can't always control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond. Is that what you're saying?
Precisely. And the Daily Stoic highlights that the real source of harm often lies not in the external event itself, but in our own beliefs and judgments about it.
That reminds me of the February 24th entry where it says, the harm comes from your own belief about the abuse.
Yes, it's a powerful reminder that our perceptions shape our experiences. We can choose to view adversity as a threat, or we can choose to see it as an opportunity for growth.
It's about recognizing that we have the power to choose our own narratives. Even when faced with difficult situations, we can reframe our experiences in a way that empowers us.
Exactly. And this brings us to another important Stoic practice, the importance of silence and reflection. The August 5th entry in the Daily Stoic really delves into this.
It's about taking the time to pause, to think before we speak, and to avoid getting caught up in the whirlwind of reactivity. Sometimes it's better to just listen and observe before jumping into the fray.
The book reminds us that sometimes the most powerful action is inaction. It's about choosing our words carefully and recognizing that silence can often be more persuasive than 1,000 arguments.
It's about having the discipline to resist the urge to always have the last word, or to engage in pointless debates. Sometimes stepping back and allowing for silence can be more effective.
Absolutely. And this practice of silence and reflection is closely tied to the idea of accepting what we cannot change. The November 2nd entry talks about binding our wishes to what will be.
It's about surrendering to the flow of life. Recognizing that we can't control every outcome, it's about focusing on what we can influence, rather than wasting energy on things that are beyond our control.
The book offers a compelling example of this with the story of General Dwight D. Eisenhower's letter to his wife on the eve of the Normandy invasion. Eisenhower had done everything in his power to prepare for the operation, but he also recognized that the ultimate outcome was beyond his control. He surrendered to the uncertainty of the situation while remaining committed to doing his duty to the best of his ability.
It's a powerful example of how we can find peace and clarity even in the midst of chaos and uncertainty. But it's not just about passive acceptance, right? The Daily Stoic also encourages us to be active participants in our own lives.
Absolutely. The December 31st entry really drives this point home. It urges us to stop wandering about aimlessly and start living with intention and purpose. It's a call to action, a reminder that we have the power to shape our own destinies.
I love that. It's about recognizing that we are not passive observers in our own lives, but active creators. We have the power to make choices, to set goals, and to take actions that move us closer to the lives we want to live.
And the Daily Stoic provides a wealth of practical tools and inspiring examples to help us along the way. From cultivating good habits to reframing our perspectives, Stoicism offers a timeless philosophy for living a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
I'm so glad we've had this opportunity to delve into the Daily Stoic together. It's been an incredibly insightful journey.
It's been my pleasure. As we move into the final part of our discussion, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. What has resonated most with you from all the practical tips and inspiring examples we've explored so far?
What really struck me is the emphasis on focusing on what we can control and accepting what we cannot. It's such a simple yet profound principle that can have a transformative impact on how we approach life's challenges.
I completely agree. That principle is at the heart of Stoicism.
Mm.
What about you? What's standing out to you as we reflect on the practical side of this philosophy?
For me, it's the focus on virtue and living in accordance with nature. It's a powerful reminder that true fulfillment comes, not from external achievements or possessions, but from cultivating inner strength and aligning our actions with our values.
Beautifully put. It's about recognizing that we have the power to choose how we respond to life's challenges and to live in a way that is consistent with our highest ideals. And speaking of challenges, the Daily Stoic doesn't shy away from the difficult realities of life, like loss and grief.
That's right. The book acknowledges the inevitability of suffering, but it offers a Stoic perspective on how to cope in a way that promotes healing and growth.
The Stoics understood that true healing comes from confronting our emotions head-on, not from trying to suppress or ignore them.
The December 8th entry, which we talked about earlier, really resonated with me. It says that it's better to conquer grief than to deceive it. It challenges the common advice to simply stay busy when you're grieving.
Exactly. Distracting ourselves might offer temporary relief, but it doesn't address the underlying pain. The Stoics believe that processing our grief honestly, allowing ourselves to feel the pain fully, is essential for moving through it.
It's about acknowledging the full spectrum of human emotions, even the difficult ones, and finding a way to integrate them into our lives. And along with processing grief, honestly, the Daily Stoic also highlights the importance of finding meaning and purpose, even in the face of loss.
That's where the May 14th entry comes in. It reminds us that true understanding comes from seeking fulfillment in our own actions, not in fleeting pleasures or the opinions of others.
It's about recognizing that our choices and actions ultimately shape our lives and give them meaning. Even in the face of loss, we still have the agency to create a life that is both meaningful and fulfilling.
And this ties back to the Stoic emphasis on virtue and living in accordance with nature. When we focus on doing the right thing, on being good human beings, we cultivate a sense of purpose that transcends external circumstances.
That sense of purpose can be an incredible source of strength and resilience, especially during difficult times. It's like an anchor that keeps us grounded when the storms of life rage around us.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that even in the face of loss and adversity, we still have the power to choose how we respond, to find meaning, and to move forward. And this brings us to another important Stoic principle highlighted in the Daily Stoic, the interconnectedness of all things.
The October 3rd entry captures this idea beautifully. It talks about how all things are mutually woven together and how everything is connected in a grand web of existence.
It's a poetic expression of the idea that we are all part of something larger than ourselves. Our actions have ripple effects, and we are all connected in ways we may not even realize.
This understanding can be incredibly comforting, especially when we're feeling isolated or overwhelmed by personal challenges. It's a reminder that we're not alone in our struggles, that our experiences are part of a larger tapestry of human existence.
And this interconnectedness leads us to one of the most profound and perhaps challenging Stoic ideas, amor fati, or the love of fate. While the Daily Stoic doesn't explicitly use the term, the concept is woven throughout the book.
It's about embracing everything that life throws our way, the good and the bad, with a sense of acceptance and even gratitude. It's about seeing the challenges and setbacks, not as punishments, but as opportunities for growth and learning.
Amor fati doesn't mean denying the reality of suffering or pretending that everything is always rosy. It's about recognizing that both joy and sorrow are part of the human experience.
It's about embracing the fullness of life, with all its complexities and contradictions, and finding a sense of peace and equanimity within that experience. It's about trusting that even the most difficult experiences serve a purpose in our overall journey.
And the Daily Stoic provides a compelling framework for cultivating this kind of acceptance and for finding meaning and purpose even in the most challenging circumstances.
I think we can both agree that the Daily Stoic is more than just a collection of ancient wisdom. It's a practical guide for navigating the complexities of modern life.
It's a reminder that the Stoic principles of virtue, reason, and acceptance are just as relevant today as they were centuries ago. They offer timeless wisdom for anyone seeking a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
So as you continue to explore the world of Stoicism and apply these principles to your own life, we leave you with this final thought. What small step can you take today to live a more intentional and fulfilling life? Until next time, keep diving deep.